Just ahead of this Albanese-Trump meeting, been a long time coming, you might want to comment on that. But in terms of the tone, is it going to be a reality check, a reset, or just a reassurance?
Actually, that's pretty hard to read. I mean, the centrepiece here, I think, from the Australian perspective, will be the Aukus agreement and the Pentagon review that's been announced. There is speculation that the results of that review are going to be made known to us in the lead up to the visit. But actually, even that is speculative. There's been very few leaks about the content of that review and where it's going to come down. Interestingly, the American Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, made a statement to the media a little while ago saying that this all looks positive for Australia and that the review is going to endorse the basic outline of the Aukus agreement that was struck under the Biden administration. I'd say back here amongst defence observers there is some scepticism about that, in the sense that even if rhetorically the Americans say yes, we're going to deliver those submarines, whether they can actually make good on that promise is really open to question. I'd say the overwhelming sentiment among defence observers here is that the American defence industrial capacity is simply not strong enough to deliver what they are promising, and also to deliver the submarines that they promised to their own navy.
Yeah, well, the UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has been optimistic about the future of AUKUS as well, but more broadly, based on the past few months, this review as well, do you feel the Trump administration's second go-around, has its approach to alliances been different from the first term?
Certainly Trump's own instincts are no different. So he's carried around a few sort of core beliefs throughout his public life. One of those is that allies are essentially exploiting the United States. He voiced that sentiment multiple times in his first term. In this second term, he's done it again. The difference is that there are fewer institutional barriers to that sentiment within the US system. He has packed his administration with like-minded people. And so the barriers to him making good on those kind of beliefs are fewer. The interesting thing from Australia's point of view is that we have kind of been exempted from that. In the first term, we were never on the receiving end of some of his verbal barbs about alliances. And so far, so good in the second term as well. Things, of course, could go desperately off the rails in this upcoming meeting. I mean, it's a high-stakes environment if ever there was one. It could be, on the one hand, a Zelensky-type situation that he faced in the Oval Office with that very public disagreement and meltdown, even, you could call it. Or it could be a perfectly cordial meeting where the two sides agree warmly with each other, and the terms of the Aukus agreement are fully reinforced. It's a measure of how unpredictable the environment is in Washington that both of those possibilities seem likely and cannot be in any way ruled out.
Yeah, because of course beyond AUKUS there are a few other interesting things to discuss as well, not the least of which the trade relationship. I mean, there is an element of surprise here in Australia that the country got hit with tariffs despite the US running a rare trade surplus. But also this notion of rare earth, and we've seen reported in local media the possibility of a deal here between the US and Australia. How significant would that be? Yeah,
I mean, the reporting's very preliminary, so it's very difficult to make judgments on exactly what Australia is proposing. Nothing that Australia can do, it seems to me, from my understanding of the industry, is going to break that stranglehold that China has on the production of these materials and its control of the market. So at the moment, this feels slightly marginal to the main game here. What I'm also a little wary of is the sense in Australian policy that we are really under the leadership of the United States, backing away slightly from the open economic principles that have served Australia so well since the 1980s, really. And included in that, of course, is strong advocacy and strong support for open trading and open borders to trade. That has been incredibly beneficial to Australia. Specific deals we do with the United States States on rare earths, I think are an indicator that our allegiance to those kind of principles is starting to erode. I think that's altogether a bad sign for Australia.
Of course, Australia's biggest trading partner is China. So Anthony Albanese's got the same balancing act as his predecessors in terms of balancing the relationship with China with the US. What's the report card so far, and what are the risks ahead?
Well, I think the really good news for Australia is that relationship, since the change of government in Australia in 2022, has improved markedly. And the reason that's good news, I don't give overwhelming credit to the Albanese government for that change, but I would give credit to Australian governments of both persuasions, because we underwent a 3-year campaign of economic coercion from China that ended in 2022, and I think it ended because both sides of politics stood firm. We didn't retaliate against China, but we stood firm and said we are not changing our policy because of this economic coercion campaign. And I think after a time, China basically realised it wasn't going to get Australia to make major policy changes under duress. And so we set an important precedent and established an important principle in our relations with China that we are still benefiting from today.
Well, we had an example of that just recently as well, with Australia signing a security deal with Papua New Guinea. What message is Canberra sending here to China about regional partnerships and influence?
Look, I think it's very difficult for Australian governments to talk openly about pure power politics in the Pacific Islands because that does offend regional sensibilities in the Pacific. But I think that's what this is. At the core of it is power politics. Australia wants to establish itself as the leading power in our region, in the Pacific Islands region, and this is an attempt, and I think a very important signal to China that Australia is the leading regional security partner, not just for PNG, but for other Pacific Island countries as well, and that if China wants to establish itself as a major alternative to Australia in the region, it's going to have to work much harder. So I think an important statement by Australia and by PNG as well, that Australia is the leading power in this part of the world, and that China's attempts to change that balance of power, which really began, probably in the sort of mid-teens period, where they rapidly upped their aid budget in the Pacific Islands region, that Australia has stepped up, again, under both governments, Liberal and Labor, and that China's going to need to do more if it wants to wrest control of the region and of the regional security environment away from Australia and its partners.